justice.
They've already banned the books with very little input. Well, now the Nampa School Board is considering transparency for its review process of which books should and shouldn't be removed. We're going to hear what they're weighing while redesigning their review process. Gas, groceries, property tax assessments, yeah, they're all on the rise. But homeowners in Valley County reached out to us about 300% increases. But does that mean they're going to pay a 300% increase in property taxes? Thanks to this Boise neighborhood, birdwatching took on a very different tone back in 2002. We're going to let John Miller explain why. There is a goal within the Nampa School District for this summer. Figure out what to do about book banning. A few weeks back, the Board of Trustees voted to remove 22 books that had been challenged by some community members. Some of those books were still being reviewed, but they were removed anyway before that review process was finished, which is why Nampa School Board President Jeff Kirkman told us last week the process for reviewing challenges isn't really clear, nor is it specific to books. And he voted to remove them back on May 9th, believing they could come back to it and create a new process and policy. There are plenty of point of views for the school board to ponder, which they began to do last night in a school board work session. Joe Paris hits on some of the highlights and explains some of the still hanging questions the board still needs to consider.
Work continues for the Nampa School Board as they take on the community question of how to handle removing books from school libraries. In recent months, some expressed concerns about pornographic content inside books. Board President Jeff Kirkman says the problem right now comes down to a lack of process for reviewing books.
There was some processes in place for this challenge book process, but personally, I just didn't see all of it at one time written down, something that I could hand to a parent in the community when asked, what is the process for challenging books?
Kirkman echoed his rationale for voting to remove 22 books, saying that he wanted to take a pause as the process to review and remove books seemed unclear. Nampa Interim Superintendent Greg Russell explained that the process being used was adapted from the process of challenges to school curriculum. Ann Christensen, a librarian at Skyview High School who was at the meeting and was a part of a parent, staff, and administrative team that reviewed challenge books, explained the process they used.
Reading these books, analyzing it, seeing if it's appropriate. My viewpoint as a parent and as a librarian and as a citizen went into that. And so there were books that we all felt that were appropriate and some that weren't, but that process wasn't honored. We felt like we wasted our time, and that we felt like there was a process already in place and that we were following that process. I don't know why you didn't know about the process, but that's what we were doing.
Feedback was also shared with the board. Some book challenges have been vague and included no details about books or issues at hand. One example?
All they said was that it was pornographic in nature.
So 3 words. I mean, basically that's what it came down to.
That was the complaint.
But there was
all that list. 24 books.
Okay.
Nampa School Board trustee Marco Valle spoke up during the meeting about concerns with the current process, defending his vote in a previous meeting to remove books pending creation of a new process. A process, he says, that needs to be specific to Nampa schools.
An electric shock sometimes is needed to make changes the right way. And we removed those books, which I'm glad we did. But let's figure out the process. I think it's got to be clear, concise, well-written, and it's got to make sense according to our community, not to Ada County, not to Colorado or Florida, and all those emails that we receive from all those places.
Nampa High School librarian Nancy Finney has worked in her role for 24 years. She says some of the books on the challenge list have not been checked out in 5 to 10 years. She reminded the board that non-curriculum books in libraries aren't forced on students, while also offering a solution for challenged books.
The books in the library are there for choice. They stay in the library. If a parent wants to take a list of books or optional books or whatever, any book that they don't want their child to read, they call the library and say, I would like these books not be available to my child.
And that's easily done.
And that's easily done by calling the school or emailing the librarian, either way, whatever way we put in the policy, right?
Nampa School Board Vice Chair Tracy Pearson pushed back on the idea, arguing some books just don't belong in school.
Some things have to have boundaries and have to have supervision in structure and procedure.
Right.
And I just believe some of those books just should not be in the library, because I know how kids are. They're gonna go find those books and they're gonna look at those, you know, what's in there. And I just think that school is supposed to be a safe place.
So a look inside what the Nampa School Board is weighing as they start to make this policy. And you may be wondering, we did as we were going through this story, how exactly does policy creation work in the Nampa School District? How does it work in terms of working with the district itself and the board? So a Nampa School spokesperson told me this, quote, "The board and district work together to create a draft policy, often based at least partially on suggested policy from the ISBA and other sources. The board reviews the policy and has the option to suggest changes to the draft or accept it. Once accepted, the district is required to follow that policy." So Brian, a big conversation moving forward is going to be, first of all, what does this policy look like? But also, how do you weigh the difference between an opt-in or an opt-out? Meaning, for example, if you were to have an opt-in process, that would mean that a parent would say, I'm opting in. I'm allowing my student to read X, Y, and Z books. The opt-out idea would be that you would have all the books available to all students, and then a parent could say, I am opting out my student from just having this. So it's really weighing the values and the ideas of two very different concepts. Do we have people opt in for everything or opt out for things that they don't want to be a part of? Kind of what they're weighing as they go through this process. The idea is still, though, according to the board chair, Jeff Kirkman, they want to have a firm policy in place by the time the school year starts. Last night was the first work meeting we saw on the topic. It'll be interesting to see over the next few weeks when they get together and kind of what they discuss.
It was interesting, enlightening to hear this meeting because, as they said, it was because of 3 words, pornographic in nature, that 22 books are now not in those school libraries. We only heard, we don't know exactly how many parents actually complained about that.
We know at least one.
At least one, and now we have a review process going forward. So, or at least they're working on that. Yeah. So that's the enlightening part to me, is that they just were able to just say, that's it, based on those 3 words.
Yeah. So there you go. That's why they're reviewing the process. It's important to remember that some of the books removed were not necessarily flagged for having problems. They were just still going through the process.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out when they get to their final decision.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe. When did you get this in the mail?
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
What did you think?
I think we're going to sell. We can't afford to live up there.
Well, that's a sentiment shared by Boise resident Paulette Owsley and how she felt and her husband felt after receiving the value assessment on their Valley County property. It's a sentiment shared by a lot of people right now. Homeowners are getting those letters in their mailbox, or have been since late last week, that show significant increases in the value of their homes and property. Why? Well, because while a bigger number on that letter might mean a bigger price tag when it comes to selling, it also means a bigger tax bill come the end of the year if you're not selling, which is why Paulette sent us a picture of her assessment last night after we talked about this on the 208. Valley County assessment, 341% increase, she said. Her property on West Mountain Road in Donnelly near Tamarack Resort went from an assessed value of $104,000 last year to nearly $357,000 this year. And yeah, that is a 341% increase, all right. But before we get into that, and what kind of assessment that kind of assessment means to Paulette and people like her, we wanted to know how Valley County came to put a $350,000 price tag or assessment on such a property. So we asked the Valley County Assessor's Office.
We use market sales. So we use whatever sales we can get. We match those up with like properties, specific geographic areas in town, McCall and Cascade. And we analyze those, we increase our values so we are within 10% of market per the state of Idaho's requirements.
Okay. Does it shock you that some people are seeing like a 340% increase over last year's assessed value?
Well, it shocked me when I started seeing sales last year. I've been doing this for over 20 years now, and I have never really seen increases like this before. So yeah, it was kind of startling when we saw those sales coming in, especially around mid-late summer, where values really started to go up.
Like 300%, that's the normal right now?
Unfortunately, that is what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of cash sales, and inventory wouldn't stay on. Inventory was off the market as soon as it came on, and that led to a huge push in people buying bare lots, which then escalated the values on those bare lots significantly.
So a lot of people are getting this letter in the mail, and they're looking at that huge jump in their assessed value and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to pay a fortune in property taxes.
Yeah, that's incorrect, really. The increase in assessed value and the taxes do not go up in tandem. There's some things within Idaho State Code that limit counties' budget increases to 3%. So generally, when the market's going up this much, we'll see taxes stay about the same unless somebody did something above and beyond their market increase, like built a garage or new house or something like that.
So you're saying somebody whose property assessed value goes up 350%, they're not going to be paying 350% increase in taxes?
Not at all. No, because the county derives a levy rate from the total assessed budget for that taxing district. And then they take their budget amount, which is limited to a 3% increase, and they divide the two and come up with a tax rate. So when you have triple the amount of assessed value and the budget can only go up 3%, that drops that tax rate down significantly.
Well, that's important. I had to repeat that a little bit because it kind of clicked for me today. Everybody get that? It did kind of click for me today. That's not that one-on-one increase when it comes to assessed property value and what you pay in property taxes. Yes, property taxes are based on the assessed value of your property, but they're primarily based on the budgets of the taxing districts you belong to, like fire or library or school or irrigation. And by state law, as you heard him just say, those budgets can't increase more than 3% over the year before's budget. But you're not paying 3% of your assessed value, you're paying a percentage of the budget increase, which again, can't go more than 3%. And that increase is then distributed and dispersed among homeowners to cover that increase based on the value of your home. Anthony Francisconi with Valley County says those budgets won't even be set until August or September this year. And he also adds, if you add in new construction in Valley County, that adds new value to the tax base, and that could actually lower taxes, lower than the year before, he said. Francisconi told us you won't even see a 50% increase in property taxes this year, and he'd be surprised if it were even a 10% increase. That doesn't seem to offer much relief to people like Paulette Owsley. She and her husband, Bob, they bought that property near Tamarack about 8 years ago, and they spent $90,000 on it, and over the last 6 or 7 years, they've made some small improvements to it. They've connected to the sewer system, they've cleared some trees because they knew Bob's retirement was coming up, and the plan was to build a home and retire there. A plan that was derailed last year when the cost to build jumped to $300 to $500 a square foot. Well, Bob would know. He's been spending the last 35 years at Franklin Building Supply. So the new plan became to add a modular home to the property. But now, after getting their assessment in the mail, Paulette says they're not even sure they're going to be able to do that.
There's a 1978 14 by 52 mobile home. It's got a snow shed roof over it, a deck out the front, a storage, like a back porch on the back end. There's a couple of old outbuildings. One is a tough shed we converted into a bunkhouse for the grandkids.
8 years ago, you paid $90,000 for it.
Yes.
And just last year, it was only assessed at $104. So it's not a huge jump in that time.
No. And all we did was clean it up.
In a year's time, it's gone up how much?
This time?
Yeah.
341%. Went up, our assessed value now up there is $356,829.
For a mobile home?
For a 1978 mobile home that has no value because it's not on a foundation.
And less than a half an acre?
0.46.
Wow.
The idea was to have something up there that we could live in year-round, and I could be up next to my girlfriend and have a very quiet retirement life. But our retirement income isn't going to support us up there, even with no mortgage.
And that's based on what you anticipate the taxes?
Yes.
Because that's going to obviously
Yes.
determine how much you pay in taxes.
Yes.
I mean, that's a significant jump. That's going to be tough to cover that?
Well, we're talking about going from $700 a year to potentially $3,000 a year. That's a huge amount of money when you're retired. It kind of dampers your retirement outlook. It's kind of hard to be upbeat and positive when you've worked your whole life for something and had a dream. We've had that dream for the last 8 years, and that dream just evaporated when we saw this, because that's not going to work for us.
There's something wrong with the system.
Thank you. Yes, there is. And it's time for people that have been footing these bills to start speaking up and speaking out, because it can't go on.
When you talk about, okay, people speaking out, who needs to listen?
Well, I'm not sure that anybody that has any authority will listen, the commissioners or the assessor's office.
This letter
Yeah.
basically just blew up your retirement.
Yeah, I think we'll probably end up now we'll probably put it up for sale, because it's not a viable option now for us to put a permanent house up there and retire up there. So let's figure out what we're going to do down here to make retirement comfortable down here, because we're not going up there.
Okay, so to be clear, Valley County made it clear that Paulette's property taxes won't be going from $700 to $3,000 by next year. It's all based on percentages, and Paulette, hopefully you understand that. Paulette says she knew it was costing more to own in Valley County. Her neighbor just sold their half-acre property, which is similar to theirs, for $342,000 last year. But this is still a case of sticker shock for her, as you heard. That trailer on the property without a foundation, she says has no value. That actually went up, according to the Valley County Assessor's Office, from $11,644 to more than $12,400. She says they couldn't even find somebody to give it to and just take it away. Bottom line, prices and property values are going crazy right now. But that value, or the increase of it, is not a direct correlation to what you will be paying in taxes every year going forward. So again, Paulette, if you're watching, I'd love to hear from you if that explanation changes your mind about whether your retirement plans are still in place. And you can reach us at this number right here. All right, time to time, we like to visit the KTVB vault for a glimpse of the past. 20 years ago, Idaho Life reporter John Miller found a bird out in Harris Ranch area that was in love with cars, or maybe just himself. In this 208 redial, John talked to construction workers who were familiar with the bird's calling card.
He seems to visit about every car in this subdivision.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to spook too easy.
In fact, Will Dillmore's been watching this bird watch itself for a couple days now.
Does he seem to prefer any car to any other? I mean, he just kind of hops around.
I don't know, he likes yours right now, that's for sure.
Hopping from the rearview mirror down to the windowsill, chomping on the occasional bug.
Sitting down, looking in the mirror.
I'm guessing it's one of three things. Either he's very territorial, he wants to learn how to drive, or he's checking out his look.
No, he's looking for a date.
Oh.
That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think he thinks he's found one. Himself.
I have 2 pied cockatiels.
So you know about birds.
Yes.
Now Todd Huff and his co-workers have a theory.
He's fallen in love with himself.
Never a feather out of place. He hangs on one rearview mirror till he takes off to check his look in another.
He's looking for love in all the wrong places, you know.
Because he ain't gonna find it in a news truck. It's like, you never know exactly where he's gonna land, Will, but you always know where he's been.
He leaves his calling card just about every place he goes.
Pausing on a rooftop just long enough to wonder, now, whose car have I not sufficiently pooped up yet?
Yeah, I think he might need a little professional help. I'm not sure. He's just pretty stuck on himself.
As long as there's a mirror around, he'll be happy. He's got a friend. A friend in himself, I guess.
That's pathetic.
It is.
John Miller, Idaho's News Channel 7.
Pathetic, maybe, but how about dangerous? Last week we were told about a crow in the north end of Boise dive bombing people who walk by. So we sent a photographer out there to see what was ruffling everyone's feathers, and he found 2 crows that made their nest in a tree near the intersection of Irene and 24th Streets. And it's caught the attention of neighbors like Suzanne Jansen.
I got the feeling they were trying to get me to not keep walking down the street. See, it's swirling back around too. It's sitting up in the tree again, yeah. I was on the wrong side of the street apparently, but I walk this street every day and I have not had that happen. So I don't know when it built its nest or when it started getting possessive, but now I'm like wanting to look out the corner of my eye.
Jansen, who lives in the area, says she walks around the neighborhood daily and has not seen these crows show up before. Well, look at that, see? They get close, don't they? Yeah, but she's never seen them as territorial as they are, apparently. Our photographer said he only saw those birds swoop down over Suzanne while he was out there, but she was told it has happened several times to others. This property tax stuff, I tell you, I mean, a lot of text messages today, and it isn't any clearer, I promise. This one from Rick here, who says, property tax, I contacted the assessor, the city, the school district. No one could get an answer on their budget and how the money was distributed. If my property went up 20% and the budgets can only go up 3%, what happens to the extra money? That's not how it works. I thought that's how we kind of explained that. But my property taxes went up $1,000 a year, and what's your 20% increase? This is clear as mud, says Rick. I know, and we couldn't even get the percentage correct because, well, I guess it's 341% of Paulette's property. Yes, that's the increase, but of the difference, we forgot to subtract that. It's only a 241% increase. We had an accountant, excuse me, kind of text in and say, you're missing some numbers there. So it isn't easy. This property tax thing is difficult to deal with, and we're doing the best we can, and we're going to try to keep explaining it as best we can. Camden County, our value went up 35% last year. Our taxes went down, says Tam, so it does work both ways. Everyone knows birds aren't real, says Ginny. That's true.